Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be talking through all the books that I read in March. As usual, I will have timestamps down below in case you wanted to skip ahead at any point, if there are any books that you're particularly interested in. But this month I did do things a little bit differently because I mentioned this in my last wrap up. I'm having a bit of a crisis when it comes to filming wrap ups because I don't like filming them. I just don't. But I do like having a record of all of the books that I've been reading. So I don't want to stop doing wrap ups. So this month I decided to try a vlog style wrap up, and I got this idea from Rachel of Rachel Kerris because she did this style of wrap up quite recently, and I think she got the idea from Victoria of What Victoria Read, who does this style of wrap up every month. I'll leave their channels linked down below in case you wanted to check them out. But basically what I did this month was at the end of each week I sat down and filmed a clip of me talking about all of the books that I'd read that week, and I found that actually it worked really well because I find it easier to talk about books when it's close to the time that I've read them. And so I think going forward I'm going to carry on doing my wrap-ups like this, but do let me know in the comments if you don't like this video, or if you do like this video, or if you have no preference, or just any general feedback, because I did find it so much easier this month. And actually it's now like the last day of the month, or the day before the last day of the month, and this video is now ready to go, so I've just got to film this intro. So yeah, it saved me a lot of time and I hope you do enjoy this video. So the first book that I finished this month was The City of Brass. No, it wasn't. It was The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty, which is the second book in the Daevabad trilogy. I did actually read The City of Brass last month, which is the first book in the series. I read it for a secret video that I wanted to be a surprise, so I didn't talk about it in my wrap-up, but I have also today finished The Empire of Gold, which is the third book in the trilogy. So I basically read an entire series in less than 2 weeks, which I didn't plan to do, but it just kind of happened. So The City of Brass follows a young woman called Nari, who is a con artist and a healer, and she is in the middle of performing this ceremony as part of a con when she starts singing in a language that she has always known but that no one else recognises, and she accidentally summons a Deva warrior who is kind of like a djinn, and straight away he recognises that she's not quite human, and so he sweeps her away on this journey to the city of Daevabad, which is the capital city of the djinn, like their home. And on the way he starts to tell her stories about the history of the djinn, and she also starts to learn more about his past. You also have another perspective of the Prince of Daevabad, and through him you learn more about the city, but also about their politics, and especially about how they treat people who are half djinn, half human. That's all I can really say without spoilers, because obviously the world does open up a lot more throughout the books, but I absolutely loved this series. I gave every single book 5 stars, which doesn't happen very often. What I loved about this series was everything, but especially the characters and how complex they are. I loved that at times they could be really frustrating and they didn't always make the decisions that I wanted them to make, but I could understand why they did things a certain way because it made sense for their character and for their development. I also really liked that there's romance in this series, but it's not the main focus of the plot. This is also the first fantasy book I think I've read that has Muslim representation, and I really enjoyed that aspect too. The only thing I will say is that it's not a light fantasy. The world building is very detailed, and so in the beginning I did find it quite hard to get my head around what was going on and keep track of what I was being told. But as the books went on, I actually started to really love learning about this world. I love that it was so detailed, and I love how immersive it felt, and I love that I felt like I was fully absorbed in what was going on. It also made me cry, which again is a pretty good indication of how much I loved it. If you like fantasy books that have a lot of politics and a lot of political intrigue, then I'd really recommend this. I'm actually really annoyed at myself that it's taken me so long to read this series, because my cousin has been recommending it to me since last summer, and I've been putting it off and I've been putting it off, but now I've read it, it is one of my favourite fantasy series of all time. The next book that I read this month was Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson, which is a YA mystery thriller that follows a girl called Enchanted who really wants to be a singer. And so she goes to this audition for a show that's very similar to American Idol. And while she's there, she meets this famous singer called Corey Fields. And he's much older than her. I think he's in his late 20s. And he offers to mentor her. And the story is basically about how he grooms her and how he uses his position as a popular singer to take advantage of her and abuse her. As you can imagine, this isn't the easiest book to read or listen to. I actually listened to the audiobook for this, and I would really recommend it if you are okay with that subject matter. I think that the narrator did a really good job of voicing the different characters and really bringing the emotion. In general, I do find that books that are told in the first person do work really well as audiobooks because you feel like you're listening to the main character tell you their story. The only reason I gave this book 4 stars and not 5 stars is because there's also a murder mystery running through the story. So at the very start of the book, Corey Fields is found dead. That's not a spoiler, it literally happens in the first chapter. And throughout the book, you're trying to work out what happened because Enchanted woke up next to the body, but she has no memory of what happened. And towards the end, I did find that that was starting to drag a little bit, but I would still recommend this. Like I said, I really enjoyed the audiobook. It's quite short. I think it's around 8 hours. There were parts during this that made me feel really, really angry, but I feel like that was the point. It's meant to be frustrating. I think that it was really well written. The next book I read was At Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert, which was one of my most anticipated books for 2021. I was so excited to read this. And for anyone who doesn't know, this is the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters series. And this follows Eve Brown, who is the youngest of the sisters. And at the very start of the book, before the start of the book, she accidentally ruins a very expensive wedding. And her parents turn around to her and give her this ultimatum. And they say that if she can't hold down a job for a year, then they're going to cut her off. So she interviews for this job working at a bed and breakfast, which is owned by this guy called Jacob. And at first he says, no, absolutely not. She's not suitable. She's not getting the job. But then she accidentally runs him over with her car as she's leaving the interview. And he has no choice but to accept her help because he's short-staffed and he's got his arm in a sling. And so he can't really do anything. And as you can probably imagine, because it's a romance book, they do end up falling for each other. And I loved this book so much. Oh my goodness, it was so cute. I really loved Jacob and Eve together. I thought their relationship was just adorable. There were so many one-liners that literally made me laugh out loud. And this is just one of those books where if you're in a reading slump or you need something that's going to put a smile on your face, then I feel like this is just perfect. It is literally my perfect romance book. I actually buddy read this with Helen from Helen's Book Haven, who I will leave linked down below if you want to check out her channel. But we both agreed that this was our favourite book in the series. I loved it. I would really recommend it. The only thing I will say is that if you don't like romance books that have a lot of explicit sex scenes, then this probably isn't the series for you. But I have loved this series and I'm really sad that it's over, but I definitely want to read more books by Talia Hibbert. So next up, I read 3 books for a thriller reading vlog where I read 3 thrillers that are all coming out in April. So if you haven't seen that yet, I will leave it linked down below and also in the cards, whatever side it is. I can never remember, but I will also summarise them here just in case you haven't seen that vlog or you don't want to watch it. So the next book I read was The Whole Truth by Cara Hunter, and this is book 5 in the D.I. Adam Fawley series, which is a British crime thriller series that's set in Oxford. In each book, you're following this team of detectives as they investigate a different crime. So you can read the books as standalones if you want to, or you can read the whole series in order like I did. I really enjoyed it, and I did also enjoy book 5, this book. It follows the team as they investigate after a male college student accuses their female professor of sexual assault. I gave this one 4 stars in the end. I did really enjoy it. I found that it was much more of a slower burn compared to the other books in this series, and it was also very character focused. And so with all the other books, I did feel like you could read them as standalones, whereas with this one, I feel like you might struggle if you haven't read the other books in the series. What I will say is that I loved the intrigue and the suspense in this book. It kept me wanting to read to find out what was going to happen. And the ending, I don't know whether it was my my personal favourite, but I couldn't see it come in, and so that was pretty good. This is still one of my favourite crime thriller series. I really enjoyed it. Have I said that already? I feel like I'm saying that a lot. I liked this book. I thought it was solid. If you've read this series so far and you're thinking of reading this, I would recommend that you read it. And yeah, I'm sure that there will be other books in this series, so I will continue to read them. The next book that I read was Watch Her Fall by Erin Kelly, and this is a mystery thriller that centres around a ballet school where the director expects nothing but perfection from his dancers. And at the start of the book, you're following a woman called Ava, who is the director's daughter, and she has just been cast as the lead role in the production of Swan Lake, which is a role that most dancers would absolutely kill for. I don't want to say much more on the plot, but I really enjoyed this book. I think that from the very start, the writing did a really good job of building the tension and the atmosphere. And then I did get a little bit confused towards the middle because the perspective started to change and I wasn't really sure what was going on, because it was still intriguing, but it seemed to be going off on a really random tangent. But then eventually it started to dawn on me what was going on. And it was just so well done. Like, it was so clever. I actually gave this book 5 stars in the end. And I think that if you like dark and atmospheric thrillers, then I would really recommend this. I definitely want to check out some of Erin Kelly's other books. I haven't read anything by her before, but I really liked her writing style. The final book that I read was Her Last Holiday by C.L. Taylor, and this is a complicated book to explain. So it's told from 3 different perspectives. You have a woman called Fran, and 2 years ago her sister Jenna went missing while on a wellness retreat. So you follow Fran in the present day, and you also follow Jenna in the past as she goes on this wellness retreat. Basically, Fran and Jenna's mom is convinced that Jenna is still alive, and so she asks Fran to go on this other wellness retreat, which is being organised by the same people, to confront them and to see if she can find out what actually happened to Jenna. The other perspective that you follow is a woman called Kate, who is one of the organisers of these wellness retreats, and her husband Tom has just been released from prison. So something else happened on that wellness retreat 2 years ago that he got sent to prison for. But now that he's been released, Kate is determined that she's going to get their business back on track. I have read quite a few of C.L. Taylor's books before, and I do like her writing style. I find that all of her books are generally quite easy and quick to breeze through. What I will say is that if you're looking for a book that has lots of shocking twists and turns, then this probably isn't the one for you, because it's much more of a gradual build-up. The characters were also pretty unlikable, but to be fair, that didn't personally bother me. I feel like when I read thrillers, I'm much more interested in the plot, and I'm much more of a plot-driven reader. Overall, I gave this book 3 stars in the end. For a while, it was between a 3 and a 4, but the ending wasn't my personal favourite. I feel like you really have to suspend disbelief. And so overall, it was enjoyable. I feel like I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but it's not going to stick with me long term. So these next few books that I read were all for Becca's Bookoplathon, which is a readathon that's hosted by Becca from Becca and the Books. I did actually vlog that whole weekend, so I'll leave a link to that vlog down below in case you wanted to check it out if you haven't seen it already, because I did go into a lot more detail on these books in that vlog. But the first book that I read for the readathon was From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So this is a fantasy romance that follows a girl called Poppy, who is something called a maiden, which means that she's not allowed to be touched and she's not allowed to experience any kind of pleasure until her ascension. However, she's a bit of a rebel, and at the start of the book she's assigned this new guard called Hawk, and the story kind of goes from there. It's really hard to talk about this book without spoilers. If you love a slow burn romance, then I would really recommend this. I cannot wait to read the next book in this series. I will say that I found certain parts a little bit predictable, but I think that the reason that I found it predictable was because I'd seen so many reviews for this before I read it. And so if you are planning to read this, I would say to try and go in not knowing too much, like try and avoid reading too many reviews, because I think that it was really easy for me to put together the pieces. I know that sounds really cryptic, but I would have enjoyed this a lot more if I hadn't known certain details beforehand. So yeah, I'm really excited to read the sequel for this. I think that if it carries on like it did at the end of this book, then it has the potential to become a new favourite. The next book I read was Sadie by Courtney Summers, and this follows a girl called Sadie whose younger sister was murdered, and not long after, Sadie also went missing. So you have these two different perspectives because you're following Sadie, but you're also following this guy who is doing a podcast about Sadie, and he's trying to find out what happened to her and is following in her footsteps. I listened to the audiobook for this and I would really recommend it. I think it's one of the best audiobooks that I've ever listened to because it's narrated by a full cast, so you have different people that are voicing the different characters. A lot of people recommended this book to me, and I did just want to say thanks to everyone who did recommend it to me, because you weren't lying when you said that this was amazing. If you're looking to get into audiobooks, then I definitely recommend it, because there were certain moments where I had to keep reminding myself that this was fiction and that I wasn't listening to a real podcast. The next book I read was A Darker Shade of Magic by Schwab, and this is about a guy called Kel who has the ability to travel between different parallel worlds. So in this book you have these 4 different parallel Londons, and Kel works as a messenger for the royal family. So each of the parallel Londons has a different leader, like a different ruler, and Kel transports messages between the different leaders. If you're looking for a fast-paced fantasy, then I would really recommend this because I read it quite quickly, and what I enjoyed the most was learning about the different parallel Londons, because you have Red London, which is the London that Kel's from, and that's a place where there's lots of magic and magic is thriving. Then you also have Grey London, which is our London, and you follow another character called Leah who is from Grey London. Then you also have White London, where magic is slowly starting to die and become uncontrollable. And then you also have Black London, which is dead because magic took over. This was actually the first book that I'd ever read by Schwab, and I did really enjoy it. I liked the writing style, and I'd like to continue the series, because my main criticism for this was that I didn't feel like there was enough character development for me to really care about the characters, but I feel like that's something that could come with the later books. The final book that I read for the readathon was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. So this is about a girl called Liz who is accepted to her dream college, but she isn't accepted for a scholarship and she can't afford to go otherwise. So she decides to campaign to become prom queen, because in her school, whoever is crowned king and queen, like prom king and queen, gets a full paid scholarship. And while she's campaigning to become prom queen, she ends up falling for the new girl at school who is also campaigning to become prom queen. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very cute and adorable, but it also had a lot of layers, and it's the kind of book that I could imagine would work really well as a film. I don't read a lot of YA contemporary physically, but I do like listening to YA contemporary as audiobooks because I find that the writing style works really well for me. I think because it's a little more conversational, it means that I find it a lot easier to focus on. So yeah, I really recommend this if you're looking for a YA contemporary. The final book I read this month was King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, and this is the 6th book in the Grishaverse, which is a fantasy series that's set in this world where you have Grisha, who can control different types of magic. Can't actually tell you much about this particular book because that would be spoilers, but this series is currently being adapted by Netflix into a TV show, which I am very excited about because it combines the original Grisha trilogy with the Six of Crows duology, and I loved both the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology, but this book was not it. And I do actually have a spoilery vlog coming soon where I read this book and where I will be reading Rule of Wolves because that is released today. So yeah, that vlog will have all of my spoilery thoughts because there were a lot. I went on a bit of a journey with this book because in the beginning I was really enjoying it. I loved being back in this world with these characters, but as it went on, there was a part in the middle that I just got a bit bored, and then towards the end the action definitely picked up a lot, and I can see why a lot of people love the ending to this book. But for me personally, really did not like it at all. I feel really bad saying that because I think it is just down to personal preference. There was nothing technically wrong with this book. I still loved Leigh Bardugo's writing, but it was more certain plot points that I just I couldn't get on board with and that weren't to my personal taste. I am still excited for Rule of Wolves, but I think it's more of a nervous excitement because as much as I was disappointed with this, there was one perspective that I really loved, and I'm hoping that that character does get more page time, screen time. I'm hoping that we see more of that character in Rule of Wolves because, I mean, I can't see it being any worse than this. I'm sorry if you love this book. I gave it 3 stars, but I think that more accurately it was a 2.5. It came out as a 5 out of 10 in Corpile, which is the rating system that I use. It was created by G at Book Roast. I talk about it sometimes in videos, and I always have it linked down below in the description if anyone wanted to find out more. But yeah, like I was saying, this was probably a 2.5, like a 5 out of 10. A little disappointing, but I am hoping that the next one I'm hoping I will have a better experience with the next one. But that does bring me to the end of the video, so thanks for watching if you've made it this far. If you've read any of the books that I've talked about in this wrap up, then please let me know in the comments what you thought of them, and especially if you've read King of Scars, let me know what you thought of this because I need to know, am I the only one who was disappointed? I know that a few people have said that they did not love this book in comparison to the earlier books, but yeah, I've talked about it enough. If you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and click subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye.